London, 1889. A city of empire and exhaustion, where wealth glittered under gaslight and misery pooled in the gutters. Every evening the fog drifted in from the Thames like a living thing, thick, pale, and quiet enough to swallow a scream. I first heard the name, the Midnight Poisoner, in an archive room beneath Scotland Yard. The files were brittle, the ink faded to rust, but the deaths described within them felt disturbingly fresh. No violence, no intrusion, only a cup of cordial taken before bed followed by stillness that no physician could explain. As I traced each case, a single phrase recurred in the constable's notes. Last seen alive after midnight, hence the name. The Midnight Poisoner. And though history has since forgotten him, London once whispered his presence in every echoing alleyway. To understand what happened, you must imagine the city as it was then, before electricity dulled the night. The streets were narrow, choked with coal smoke. The wealthy drifted in carriages through Mayfair, while the poor huddled by the river in tenements that smelled of damp straw and paraffin. Medicine, in those years, was as much art as alchemy. Chemists sold powders of arsenic and mercury as freely as flour. Laudanum, a syrup of opium and wine, was prescribed for sleeplessness, grief, even teething. In the wrong hands, every cure could become a weapon. It was in that twilight world of science and superstition that Dr. Edwin Mallory practiced his trade, a physician of education, refinement, and secrets. Mallory had graduated from King's College with distinction in chemistry. Patients described him as soft-spoken, immaculate, and oddly detached, as though every consultation were an experiment whose result he alone understood. By outward measure, he lived respectably. A townhouse on Bloomsbury Street, an assistant, a reputation for treating female disorders of the nerves. His waiting room smelled of lavender and disinfectant, his handwriting crisp as a ledger. Yet death seemed to follow him with the punctuality of the postal service. Between December 1888 and February 1889, 3 of his patients perished in nearly identical fashion. Exhaustion, tremors, final collapse within an hour of taking his prescribed night mixture. No wounds, no struggle. The official verdict each time: heart failure. Such conclusions were convenient. Victorian physicians guarded one another's dignity like priests protecting relics. But one observer refused to accept coincidence. Her name was Clara Finch, a young reporter working for the Illustrated Courier. The daughter of a dock clerk, educated beyond her station, she had clawed her way into journalism by covering charity balls and royal processions. Yet beneath the polite assignments, she collected stories of the city's forgotten, women whose deaths filled no column inches. When her own landlady fell mysteriously ill after a visit to Dr. Mallory, Clara began to sense the outline of something darker. She recorded every symptom, every bottle left upon the bedside table, and when the old woman died, she kept the empty vial. Later, at the morgue, she caught a faint smell of bitter almonds escaping from the cork. Those who study poisons know that scent well. Cyanide. Clara's notes, later found in her effects, described her determination to trace the origin of that vial. In those pages lies the earliest surviving account of the Midnight Poisoner case. As I followed her trail through police memoranda and personal journals, I could almost feel her presence in the city, walking alone through drizzle, notebook clutched beneath her shawl. She began visiting the chemist who supplied Mallory's practice, asking about his orders, pretending to write a feature on modern tonics. Most dismissed her inquiries as harmless curiosity, but one assistant, perhaps uneasy, mentioned the doctor's private laboratory behind the dispensary, where he prepared certain mixtures himself long after midnight. In March 1889, she entered that room, bribing the night clerk with the last of her savings. Candlelight revealed rows of bottles whose labels glimmered like ghosts: hydrocyanic acid, chloral hydrate, morphia. Among them lay a set of ledgers bound in cracked leather. Each page listed a date, a patient's name, and beside some names a single word written in red ink: midnight. The handwriting was Mallory's. When Clara left the shop, the fog outside was dense enough to hide her shaking hands. She believed she had uncovered a pattern of deliberate killing. She was half right, and half a step from becoming the next entry. The following day she approached Inspector Henry Graves of Scotland Yard, one of the few senior officers sympathetic to female journalists. Graves examined the ledger, compared it with hospital death rolls, and found multiple matches, yet he cautioned her that suspicion was not proof. In Victorian Britain, a doctor's respectability outweighed a woman's testimony almost absolutely. Still, Graves opened a discreet inquiry. Witness interviews revealed that Mallory had been conducting independent research for a pharmaceutical firm developing new anesthetics. He possessed a rare permit to import experimental compounds, substances far more potent than opium or ether. But financial motive was absent. His accounts showed modest income, steady donations to medical societies. What then drove him? The more I studied the surviving correspondence, the more Mallory's obsession became clear. He believed pain was not merely a symptom, but a disease of the soul, one that could be purified through chemical transcendence. Death to him was a side effect of imperfection, proof that the mixture still required refinement. His victims were not targets, they were data. Each midnight experiment brought him closer to a formula that could end human suffering altogether, or erase humanity trying. London moved through March with its usual indifference. Fog thick enough to drown the lamplight, hansom cabs rattling like hollow bones across the bridges. Beneath that normal rhythm, Clara Finch continued her pursuit, an invisible thread weaving through the city's sleeping heart. Every evening she noted the doctor's movements. His carriage left Bloomsbury just after 9, returned a little past midnight. The routes varied, the purpose unclear. Sometimes he visited the charitable infirmaries of Whitechapel, where sick children coughed in rows. Other nights he disappeared into wealthy parlors whose doors closed fast behind him. It was as if two versions of Dr. Mallory existed. One a benevolent physician, the other a nocturnal wanderer dispensing silence by the spoonful. Clara's notes record that she rarely slept. The city's sounds, iron shoes on cobblestone, the hiss of gas jets, the faraway toll of St. Paul's, merged with her heartbeat until even daylight felt unreal. She was certain now that Mallory's night mixtures contained more than sedatives. Yet to prove it, she needed evidence from the source itself. One rainy dusk she followed the doctor's carriage to the back entrance of a private sanatorium on Harley Street. Through the fogged windows she saw him conferring with another man, faces pale in lamplight. Minutes later, attendants wheeled out a covered stretcher. Clara could not tell whether the patient within still lived. She wrote only 2 words in her notebook: too late. Over the following weeks, Inspector Graves gathered quiet confirmations of her suspicions. He questioned chemists who had supplied Mallory's laboratory. Each recalled the same peculiar request: quantities of hydrocyanic acid ordered in precise fractions, small enough to avoid attention but cumulative beyond any medical purpose. The inspector's memoranda, now browned with age, bear his underlined remark: no record of these solutions administered for legitimate research. The police chemist who analyzed residue from one returned vial described the compound as a modified anesthetic, lethal in undiluted form, its presence undetectable after 30 hours. It was, in essence, a perfect poison, fast, clean, and invisible to Victorian testing. Still, legal proof eluded them. Inquests relied on witnesses, not science. Without confession or clear motive, prosecution would collapse. Graves advised caution. Clara interpreted it as cowardice. She began compiling her own dossier, names, addresses, medical dates, planning to publish under pseudonym if the Yard refused to act. By late April, the city seemed to conspire with her anxiety. The fog lingered for days. Newspapers speculated about miasmas rising from the Thames. Disease, rumor, and death blended into one texture of dread. In that climate, a story like hers could either awaken public outrage or vanish beneath disbelief. Meanwhile, Mallory's behavior changed. He dismissed his assistant, canceled lectures, and was observed purchasing quantities of distilled water, chloroform, and brandy. Witnesses said he looked ill, drawn, distracted, muttering about purity of the spirit. Clara noted these reports with the precision of an auditor, sensing that the experiment was approaching its final stage. On the evening of May 2nd, she walked to Bloomsbury under relentless drizzle. Gaslights bled into halos of gold across wet pavement. From across the street, she saw a single window lit in Mallory's study. Inside, his silhouette moved deliberately between desk and cabinet. After nearly an hour, he blew out the lamp, leaving only the glow of the fire. Clara waited until the carriage departed before approaching the servants' entrance. Her objective was simple: secure physical proof of poison. What she found instead was something far more disturbing. Mallory's private dispensary occupied a narrow annex behind the house. The lock yielded easily to the skeleton key she had borrowed from the chemist boy. Inside, the air smelled of camphor and decaying wood. Shelves bowed under the weight of glass bottles, some labeled in Latin, others not at all. Dust motes drifted through the beam of her lantern like slow-moving snow. Among the clutter stood a writing desk piled with notebooks. One volume lay open, its pages covered in precise script and numerical tables. The heading read simply, "Mortality, Series B." Each line documented a patient's initials, dosage, and time of cessation. Never death, always cessation. The entries advanced steadily toward perfection. Fewer convulsions, shorter intervals. The final notation ended with the single phrase, "Control experiment pending." Clara realized that control referred not to a substance but to herself. Her letters to Mallory requesting interviews, her interest in his work. He had noticed everything. The awareness hit like a physical blow. She replaced the ledger exactly as she found it, extinguished her light, and stepped into the alley. Rain washed the panic from her face, but not the certainty that she had been expected. The final inquiry. Inspector Graves received her account the next morning. His official report, preserved in the Yard archives, notes, "Informant credible. Subject displays signs of mania consistent with prolonged exposure to fear." Still, he authorized discreet surveillance of the doctor's practice. 2 constables watched from a tobacconist's window opposite the entrance. For 3 nights, nothing occurred. On the 4th, Mallory left carrying a small case and a single envelope sealed in wax. He posted the letter and returned home. That letter, intercepted later by Graves, was addressed to the Royal Society of Physicians. Its contents read like a confession masked as theory. If pain be the corruption of matter upon spirit, then the elimination of sensation is the truest cure. Life and death are but variables in the same equation. No overt admission, yet no doubt of intent. At last, Graves obtained a magistrate's warrant to seize laboratory materials. But warrants moved slower than poison. Before the ink dried, another death occurred. Lady Ainsworth, one of Mallory's wealthiest patrons, found lifeless after her customary midnight tonic. Public gossip exploded. Newspapers speculated about contagious maladies, while chemists whispered about criminal misuse of anesthetics. Mallory, ever calm, attended the funeral himself. He even signed the death certificate. The inspector recognized that conventional arrest might provoke panic among London's upper class. Instead, he proposed an undercover operation. Lure the doctor into administering his tonic under observation. Clara, though warned of danger, insisted on participation. "The city will never believe it," Graves later wrote, "unless the proof comes from the hand that has witnessed it." On the night of March 11, 1890, arrangements were made. A rented room above a modest Mayfair lodging house served as their stage. The environment was chosen carefully. Neutral ground, professional facade. Graves stationed men in adjoining rooms, ready to intervene. At exactly 9, Dr. Mallory arrived carrying a black medical case. His demeanor was unhurried, his conversation courteous. He accepted the forged patient records presented to him without question. The police transcript describes what followed in meticulous detail: the preparation of the draft, the doctor's calm explanation of its sedative qualities, the faint smile when asked about side effects. He poured the colorless liquid into a glass and stirred it gently, remarking that rest will come swiftly. Clara did not drink. At Graves's signal, officers entered. Mallory's eyes, witnesses said, showed neither shock nor fear, only irritation, as though interrupted during calculation. A struggle ensued when he attempted to destroy the bottle. In the scuffle, the vial shattered. Drops splashed across his wrist. Within seconds he staggered, complexion paling, words dissolving into whispers. The poison acted faster than even he anticipated. He collapsed beside the table, heartbeats slowing until silence filled the room. The official cause of death recorded by the coroner: self-administered cyanide compound, accidental ingestion during apprehension. But the private diary of Inspector Graves tells a different story. He chose the manner of his exit, as if completion were preferable to confession. By dawn, the news spread across the capital. Headlines read, "Distinguished Physician's Sudden Death." Only days later did whispers of poisoning appear, seeded by anonymous leaks. The establishment preferred discretion. No inquest was held beyond formal identification. Mallory was buried in Highgate beneath a headstone devoid of epitaph. His property, seized and inventoried, revealed chemical records decades ahead of contemporary science, notes on neural suppression, tissue preservation, and what he termed spiritual anesthesia. Clara Finch published her exposé under initials only, fearful of libel. The article ignited both fascination and outrage. Some readers saw Mallory as a visionary destroyed by misunderstanding. Others called him devil incarnate. The truth, as always, dissolved somewhere between. For Graves, the case ended not with triumph but with unease. He ordered the destruction of remaining compounds, yet rumors persisted that samples survived in the possession of private collectors. The official file was sealed, classified, forensic reference only. Decades later, those papers would resurface in the archives I studied, still faintly scented of almonds.